government, and history of Indigenous peoples on this day, and encourages residents, businesses, organizations, and public institutions to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Be it further resolved that the Salt Lake City Council firmly commits to continue its efforts to promote the well-being and growth of Salt Lake City's American, Indian, and Indigenous community, and declares the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Salt Lake City. This has been signed unanimously by all 7 council members. So.
Mr. Chair.
So, thank you. Mr. Chair, I would like to have all of us come down for a photo with Marona Benally.
Charlie, if I may.
Absolutely.
I
I
would defer to you to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Oh. Thank you. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. So I move that we adopt this resolution.
I would second that motion.
So a motion's been made by Councilmember Luke and second by Councilmember Penfold. Is there any discussion before we vote on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that resolution passes.
Okay.
So as we go on through the meeting this evening, you're going to have a couple of reminders as we progress. So I've got some information in regards to public hearings. We have a few opportunities for public comment tonight, and we will call people based on the comment cards that have been turned in. Please note that if you have already spoken at a public hearing on a specific topic, you may not speak again during that hearing, even as a continued hearing, but you may speak during the general comment period.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I get a clarification from staff? I believe that several of the hearings this evening are actually new hearings on the same topic. So I don't think we're following the continuation rules, but I think I need to get a clarification from staff on that. Cindy, Lehu is nodding yes. So these are actually new. They're not continued. They're actually new hearings, so people can speak again on the issue.
So items B1 through B15, I believe. Yes, B15. Feel free to speak. Just no clapping, no jeering. Just if we can be civil while we're doing that. We're going to start with item B1, which is an ordinance for consolidated fee schedule amendment for the foreign trade zone fees. And I don't see any cards for this one. Is there anyone that would like to speak in regards to this? Excuse me? You want to speak in regards to this ordinance for a consolidated fee schedule amendment for foreign trade zone fees? We can absolutely have staff come and talk to you about that while we move on. Seeing no individuals wanting to speak on that, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the council close this public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Mendenhall and seconded by Councilmember Luke. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the Salt Lake City Consolidated Fee Schedule for foreign trade zone fees.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Mendenhall and a second by Councilmember, was it Kitchen? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. We are on to item B2, which is a resolution for public benefits analysis of waiver of city fees associated with public health center. And I don't have any comment cards on this either. Is there anyone that would wish to speak in regards to this? Seeing none, council members, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close this public hearing and defer action to a future meeting.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Penfold and a second by Councilmember Johnston. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. We're on to item B3. I have one card, and it's an ordinance for an alley vacation from 1600 East to 1700 East between Emerson Avenue and Roosevelt Avenue. I have a card from Kent Alderman, if you'll come forward. Is Kent here? Oh, he does not wish to speak. Unless he wants to. But I'm reading it right now, so I've got it. Anyone want to speak in regards to this? Okay. I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move we close this public hearing and defer action to a future meeting.
A motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and seconded by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. We're on to item B4, an ordinance which is an alley vacation and street closure at approximately 408 West Dalton Avenue, which is approximately 1050 South. And I do not have any cards in regards to this. Does anyone want to speak in regards to this item? Seeing none, council members.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close this public hearing and defer action to a future meeting.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and seconded by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. On to item B5, which is an ordinance for the Northwest Quadrant Overlay and M1 text amendment. And okay. So we'll hang on one second. We've got one individual who would like to speak to this moment. Come on forward and give us your name, and you've got 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Zach Hartman. I represent Epperson and Morehouse in the Northwest Quadrant. They're the largest landholders. I think I'm on the right piece, right? They just sent me in. Okay.
Speaking
Is
to
that
the
better?
microphone. Yeah, it's better.
Okay. So, yeah, we've been working for years on this, and it's a really good step in the right direction. We're pretty excited that we're kind of moving forward. As we learn more and more about inland ports and the requirements, I think we'll come back for additional adjustments, just because we're learning criteria from, people kind of outside our, I've never built an inland port before, or whether or not that's a desirable thing. So I would expect us to come back and have a few tweaks to this. And I think we'll just keep moving forward. And anyway, it's exciting that we've worked with the NGOs to have a positive outcome here, and it's pretty cool. So anyway, just saying thanks for everything, and there'll be a few more tweaks, but in general, we're excited. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in regards to the this ordinance for the Northwest Quadrant Overlay at M1 text amendment? All right, council members, I don't have anyone else willing to speak. Look for a motion.
I'll move we close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Mendenhall and second by Councilmember Johnston. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. We're on to item B6, which is an ordinance for the Transit Master Plan. And I have a few cards. I'm going to read two. If the first person would come up to the microphone, the second one be ready. Bridget Allison Eberly, followed by George Chapman.
I'm afraid I don't know how to use a microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Bridget Allison Eberle. I live at 727 East, 800 South, and I am, by choice, a transit user. I have never garaged a car here in Salt Lake. I'm a 31-year property owner, and when I purchased my home, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Back further? Same. When I purchased my home 31 years ago, I purchased it intentionally on 7th East and 8th South because it had 4 bus routes, 21, 32, 33, and 44. There were 2 roads at that time that had 4 bus routes. One was State Street, one was 7th East, knowing that I exclusively use public transit, bike, or walk as my mode of transportation. As the city developed their transit plans and as the Olympics came, transit has become more of a commuter and not a community transit. It's as if everything works towards the tracks. As somebody who spent $45 on a taxi to get to a doctor's appointment this morning because transit couldn't be coordinated. So as you're working on this the transit plan, which you have stated is for looking at the policies that are considering for the next 20 years of transit growth, I apologize, I didn't get all the way through that huge master plan. I got about halfway through. If you could please really consider the community regarding those of us who work, worship, shop as our mode of transportation. Something maybe like a neighborhood shuttle. And I did notice in getting halfway through that they are considering a hub at 7th East and 2nd South, but they have removed all the buses from 7th East. We only have commuter early in the morning and late in the afternoon. So thank you for allowing me to speak. And just as you're working on that, if they could please consider those of us who public transit is our only method of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind everyone one more time, please don't clap.
I'd like to clap for the last speaker because I agree. Why are we spending money in the plan, proposed in the plan, for a couple of transit stations on 7th East or 5th East and at the University of Utah when we need more frequent bus service? We need it late at night. 21st South Lisa still stops at 9 o'clock. You know it's an entertainment district. You know kids go from the University of Utah, hopefully over 21, to the bars there, and they can't get back. So we do need better bus service and later night bus service before we consider any of the other high investment areas that are in the map in your transit plan proposal. The high investment areas are taking away money from better bus service. And I agree with the plan's idea of high frequency network. That should be the priority. But as Kristen Harrison mentioned last time, anytime you put in projects, there's a tendency to want to build those projects. That's going to pull money away from bus service like it did with tracks. Please don't let that happen. We need better bus service. Stan, 9 o'clock, last bus coming through there. It doesn't make sense when people want to go downtown to a great theater district and they can't get back on transit. It doesn't make sense. So I encourage you to focus on the frequent transit network and better service at night, evening, weekends, and holidays, because downtown does not shut down on holidays. Please, better service should be before project. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. James Berenson, followed by Alicia Cardenas.
Why is it, these bus driver commissioners, they want big raises and whatnot when they're not even doing a good job now? Promotion should come from excellency in your occupation, and they keep failing. The number of buses that run and everything else. I'm sure y'all don't depend on the buses, so it's not a real big inconvenience to y'all, but people that do take the bus, waiting like an hour, 45 minutes for a stupid bus to come. And then another thing is the Utah is like one of the 5 most highly cost to use a mass transit system. Out of 50 states, Utah's in like the top, or Salt Lake's in the top 5 for cost. $2.25, $2.50. This is outrageous.
Hi, my name's Alicia Cardenas, and I'm here as a representative as the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. You guys have received a few letters from our committee over the last month or so about a couple of items, including this transportation master plan, this transit master plan. And I would like to add that as a committee, we not only strongly support the transit master plan as written, we're particularly interested in the first and last mile improvements that are included. And our committee wholeheartedly supports increasing transit, improving first and last mile access, and doing anything we can to make our air more breathable so we can continue to be a safe, beautiful city. Thank you so much.
I'm down to my last comment card on item B6, the ordinance for the transit master plan. I've got Dave Iltis. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the transit master plan? Great. Mr. Iltis.
Hi, my name's Dave Iltis. I'm with Cycling Utah. The transit master plan is mostly pretty good, but in reading through the executive summary, it seems like the streetcar's been given absolutely short shrift. We've put a ton of money into this, and it's resulted in incredible development along the S-Line corridor. There's some issues with that, but I really question what you guys are doing if you have a transit master plan that is really minimizing the streetcar, which has changed the face of Sugar House. And you've got lots of options for extending that. That's been controversial. However, I'm certainly some agreement can be come to on the extension through Sugar House. And you've also have other corridors like through the Granary District and the existing tracks, downtown circulator and things like that where a streetcar would be appropriate. Certainly there are some issues with that, but I was very dismayed to see that the minimization of that. Other things that, again, the plan is mostly good. I don't think it's ready to pass without maximizing the streetcar in there. There are issues around bicycle and pedestrian safety in buses that's not included in the plan. I've made comments to that effect. I think that's supposed to get included, but safety around transit is fairly minimally mentioned, and that's really a problem with this. Generally and overall, we need to look at a transit master plan that hooks into the rest of Salt Lake City's transportation and the valley's transportation and brings us into the 21st century and doesn't leave us stuck. And that's some worry with that, with the minimization of the streetcar. Other things in there, looking at, which aren't really mentioned much, looking at a shift towards free transit in Salt Lake. And, there's been this various talk of like Salt Lake running its own transportation system, but you could get there by making UTA or Hive passes available for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iltis. Council members, I don't have any other comment cards.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the council close the public hearing and defer consideration of this master plan to a future date.
A motion's been made by Councilmember Kitchen and second by Councilmember Luke. Is there any discussion? Yes.
I think we want to be careful to keep ourselves, make it available for us to make some changes if we want to. And if we do, then I think we need to have an additional public hearing if we make changes to that. Just want to point that out to the public that doesn't, just because we're saying defer action to a later date doesn't mean this won't be discussed again. Thanks.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. We're on to item B7, which is an ordinance. It's a petition to amend an ADU-related provisions. All right. I'll call two cards. First one, please come up. Second one, be at the ready. Bridget Allison Eberly, followed by Amir Cornell.
Sorry to bother you again, but there's just 3 items tonight that are very concerning for me. I am the caregiver of a 91-year-old bedbound father and an 80-year-old mother. I commute between Pennsylvania and Utah as a caregiver. I have been actively involved in trying to work on how to provide housing for them and to bring them here to Salt Lake. I have spoken to people in the past regarding their potential passing of an ADU law. There are two things that I'm extremely concerned about that I did not know about till today. One of them is finding out that citywide, they're only going to consider 25 permits. But with all of the development that has gone on in the city, those of us who are homeowners, who are also caregivers and in the sandwich generation, I don't think 25 permits is going to even come close to touching that. And also, my questions in the past when I have asked about this situation have been regarding a tiny house as far as an accessible unit for my parents. I want something that's mobile that I can take to different siblings' homes. And so they were saying that they would only consider ADUs as something permanent on the property. So if they could please be willing to consider a tiny home. There are those of us who don't necessarily have parents in the same state that we reside in. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Amir Cornell?
Mr. Chair, may I have a moment of personal privilege?
Yes.
Just a note, if you could, I'm sorry, Barbara, is it?
Bridget?
Bridget. Nick Tarbett, could you raise your hand? Nick on our staff here has some information that I think would probably be useful regarding homes on wheels and what our authority is and isn't. That you could probably step into the hallway and he could chat with you about it now if you'd like.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for being my City Council. We're gonna miss two of you, but wishing you good luck. And the reason I'm here is I am for ADU. Last December, Governor Herbert appointed a commission why we are shortage with the housing in Wasatch Front. In month of March, they get back to governor and they said, bad zoning, bad ordinance. Recently, in town of Provo, they allowed to have mini houses, 450 square feet. And the same thing in Park City. We have a unique city. One called Avenue, district in Avenue, the other one our District 7. On page of ordinance, if you look at it, it said you can build a guest house for 650. One size doesn't fit us all. I have a 1/3 in an acre. My neighbor has a 0.41 acre. All of them, they bought these big lots for future improvement. I would like you folks ask planning to change that and go by the rest of the cities in Salt Lake County, like Sandy, like Holiday, like Midvale, like Draper. They go by the size of the lot, or they go by the size of the current house divided by 2 with the height of 22 to 24
Time.
height. That's all. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Michael Fife, followed by Dave Van Langeveld.
Good evening. I'd like to speak in favor of the current ADU ordinance as it is right now. It's not going to solve the housing problem in Salt Lake City, but I think it's an important small part of the total puzzle to increase housing in Salt Lake City. I think I would make 2 changes. Everybody has a few changes to make. I would eliminate the parking requirement for any lots that are within walking distance of a fixed transit station. And I think that the 25 number of the 25 limit should not be an annual limit, but it should be a trigger to reevaluate the ordinance and see how it's working. We may not meet the 25. I think we have like 3 or so that have been built in the past couple of years, so it may take a while. Or it may not. And so if we're building them like crazy, I think we need to take a checkpoint and see how it's going. I also, there's concerns about parking. The city spends a lot of money on building roads, and I think we it's great that we maximize our investment by having people park on the side of the road. That's all I have on ADUs. Just listening to the discussion today, I just want to say that I think that the Miller Practice Facility signage is unnecessary and the Regent Street signage is absolutely necessary. And I just want to thank Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Penfold for your service, since I probably won't be here the rest of the year. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Mr. Fife.
I'm Dave Van Langeveld. I live at 807 North Cliff Drive in the Avenues area. I served as the chair of the Greater Avenues Community Council in 2011, and we had quite a battle over ADUs at that time. We had a meeting with city experts coming out and talking about the issue. We took a straw vote since we weren't able to take an official one, and it was 30-2 opposed to ADUs in the Avenues area. I don't think that has changed much, and much of the reason why is the parking issue, which is quite crowded in the Avenues area. There are 4 streets that you could probably park on both sides and not worry too much about getting sideswiped by someone with 2 cars going past at the same time. The rest of them are narrow enough you cannot do it. Snow removal is a major issue in the Avenues, and of course with the hills you have to have snow removal. So I would encourage you to look back at what happened in 2011. As I understand it, and I heard the number 3, I heard that there had only been 1 ADU built under the previous ordinance, and that might not be right. But there have not been many, and they were to be within a half mile, as I recall the ordinance, of track stations. I think you have to look at what happens. If we get a ADU built, it allowed stacked parking. Well, guess what? You're not going to get people to stack park. There's going to be 1 car in the driveway, possibly, and the other on the street. And it's just going to end up with a much more crowded situation. I would encourage you to re-examine this, and it may be appropriate for some neighborhoods, but it certainly is not appropriate for most of the avenues. And I would encourage you again to re-examine that and reconsider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Langeveld. Jeremy Ranks, or it could be Banks, I'm sorry, Jeremy, followed by George Chapman.
You were close, second one. My name is Jeremy Banks. I understand that ADUs are a heated topic. However, they're happening whether we pass this or not. I can't count how many illegal ADUs there are in Salt Lake City. And so why not encourage legal ADUs and help encourage aging in place? I currently live in District 7. I'm sure you're aware, but Sugar House is very expensive to live in. Many companies, including my own, are moving down south because that's where the new tech market is. And as a working professional, it's hard to live in Sugar House, despite increased costs. So I am in favor of the ADUs. I do have an issue with the portion of the amendment about height restrictions. I've emailed several of you about it. As I drive through Sugar House, 1 in 40 homes are 18 feet tall. And so the new amendment makes it impossible to build above a detached garage. I think it's vital to remove that stipulation that many people read over that wouldn't allow someone to build an ADU taller than their primary residence and just keep it at the 24 feet. Otherwise, I think we'll run into the same situation with the half-mile track station. You will have 1 ADU. Also, I think short-term rentals aren't an issue. I doubt that people who are willing to go through the mile of building a legal ADU will let their ADU go to trash. Also, like others, I agree that 25 permits is unrealistic. There's no need to cap such a great program. So again, I urge you to remove the height restriction regarding can't be taller than your primary residence, and I appreciate your time.
I'm going to speak against the ADU ordinance. The main reason is you do not have, as Charlie I think mentioned, you do not have an enforcement mechanism. You're not funding an enforcement mechanism. So if anybody next to an ADU, legal or illegal, complains, there's not much you can do. It might take a few years to get them out, but you don't have an enforcement mechanism, and you keep passing project bills that implement something like this without fully considering the after effects, the required maintenance for something like this, and you're doing it again. So I'm asking you not to approve it. There are all sorts of other issues too. The owner-occupied doesn't seem like it could be maintained, because what happens when the owner dies? The ADU goes away? I don't think that's legal. So once you approve an ADU, I don't think you can take it away. And there's another issue about mortgage companies have a problem with people saying they live in the home, but they don't. So how do you enforce that? Do you go in and inspect that the owner's there? There's no enforcement mechanism in this bill, and that is why you should not approve it. Some of the other speakers previous mentioned that there's some areas that absolutely can't take more density. Avenues is one. Parking is part of the reason, because even though they're supposed to have an off-street parking spot, you know people are going to park on the street. The same with 17th South. It can't take any more on-street parking. By the university, same thing. So because of those limitations, you really need to put it back. And it's not going to make that much difference, because look what happened in the last 5 years. 3 units were approved, 3 ADUs. So that says that you're not going to get that much more ADUs. Please don't approve this bill.
Christian Fonsbeck, followed by Judy Short.
Good evening. My wife and I moved into the Avenues 46 years ago, and we were warned about the junkies and the hippies in the Avenues. But we liked the houses, we liked the trees and the people. Our daughter came back from school with her first school photo. Every kid was a different color. We thought that was great. The area was crowded. Our first apartment where we lived had a house with 6 apartments. The closest house, 9 apartments. We worked with the city, built our house, and then we underwent downzoning, restoration, gentrification. Now we have a beautiful neighborhood, not a bunch of identical houses. It's a mixed-use neighborhood with high density, diverse architecture, diverse people, well-kept lots, contrasted by a few absentee landlords. Our favorite grandma died, and her son inherited the house and rented to a bunch of college kids, 5 cars, 3 motorcycles. But we're not in an R1 zone, and we work with that. Why do we need ADUs? We already meet the criteria: mixed use, high density, diverse architecture, well-kept lots. Our neighbors protect the neighborhood, pick up trash. You not only pick up the poop from your dog, you pick up any poop you find. Where else in the world does that happen? We think the city should enforce and legalize existing units and check them for health and safety before considering new ones. The avenues are pretty crowded now. We have stress on existing infrastructure, sewer, water, traffic, parking, trees. These criteria have been studied. The major driver for ADUs, I think, is the economic benefit.
Time.
I'll get mine first. Well, that's not really not fair. And we're not interested in geographic equity. This is a remedy for suburbia, not for Salt Lake's primary historic district. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Short, and I think you're hearing some common themes here, so I hope you'll take some of them under advisement. In general, I think I'm in favor of the ADUs, but I'm not in favor of them in every single neighborhood. And I would single out the avenues as a case that's pretty crowded. They've done a lot of work to bring all those wonderful homes that used to be 10 apartments back to single family. And I think that might be a place that they should have a vote and say, we don't want it. I don't like the idea of a 30-day administrative review only to abutting properties. Extra cars impact a whole block, not just those in front of the property in question. So I think the whole block face should be notified. I'll repeat my concern that we not close any more alleys. I'd rather see an ADU built on top of a garage with access from the alley, rather than build a huge driveway so all the cars can park, and then we don't have any permeable land. We can't plant trees and vegetables in the backyard. That's not a sustainable practice. The alleys are already there. We ought to just maintain them and use them. You need to beef up enforcement of all housing in the city to set a standard. Right now, people are always trying to get away with something and hope they don't get caught. 3 that you know about have been built, but I bet there are 25 or more that have been built that you don't know about. You ought to be paying attention to that. I prefer that they're owner-occupied, at least 1 unit, and the reason I say that is, look at 13th East, what an example that is. Most of those homes are now rentals, and the whole street is not the pretty street it used to be. There's a big difference, I think. There's a funny comment in there about existing windows.
Time.
Shouldn't be relocated, and I think they should be relocated if adding the ADU makes them take away someone's privacy. And then I'll also say that I think parking is the biggest issue. Airbnbs are allowed. There's one next to me that advertises 16 beds. Now, if they all come by Uber, that's not a problem.
Ms. Short, can you finish your thought, please?
I will, one sentence. But the last family came with about 20 of them and 5 cars. We don't have 5 spaces on the street. So I think that's a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carol Anderson, followed by Maureen McLean.
When Intermountain Intertribal School closed Brigham City, we moved to Salt Lake for work and purchased a home near Fair Park, later including the Northwest Center. The neighborhood kept changing. Residential homes purchased by investors became rentals, and the fourplex next to our home changed too. Tenants increasingly were low-wage earners, handicapped, on welfare, single mothers with children. There was a bus stop out front, but no money for bus fare. Money for food ran out. Daycare was not affordable. I had children over for picnics, and I offered free daycare so the parents and the children would have help. The fourplex sold to an investor. More changes. Renters moved in and out, and we tried to evict those drug dealers and chop shops for stolen cars, and worse were the women who were solicitors from areas near the road home. They were homeless and had addictions. Free drugs offered plentifully was a ruse to transport them to the fourplex home of prostitution. Police were called. The homeless with addictions are ineffective to defend themselves. Quickly, the unit was empty. They moved out and on. A drive-by shooting put bullet holes in our picture window. I moved to Wasatch Drive. My son had a home there. My husband was determined to keep the riffraff out and fix the windows. He wanted his home back. We are not isolated from the home next door or from our communities. Residents along the Jordan River have transient population increasing due to the changes at Road Home. Radical changes, we have residential zoning, and there are radical changes. Barriers to homelessness are not easy to resolve. Zoning that is all or nothing will not change poverty, drug addiction, mental illness, handicap, all requiring years of intervention, increased cost. ADUs are needed, but a citywide zoning change creates problems.
Hi, we appreciate your service. The ordinance of the ADUs was a great idea when it was proposed. I think most of us accepted it because we thought it was going to be just on certain areas within tracts. Made sense. We need more housing in the core of Salt Lake City. And this blanket ordinance proposal to open it up for all of Salt Lake City is a very difficult thing for most of us to understand, and I include most of us in the neighborhood where I live. Immediately, it was told that it was not going to be above 13th East, or it wasn't going to be on the avenues. And you've heard this gentleman who served on his community council, and the problems that he ran into trying to get an okay. It just wasn't going to work. And the problems still exist on the avenues, left over from an ADU that was tried in the late 40s and early 1950s. I've lived here all my life, well, most of my life, and I remember that. Now, this proposal, this ordinance, has also blanketed Portland. I'd like to see if you'd be happy if you lived there and had that ordinance in your yard. It's just not something we can accommodate. Certain neighborhoods, yes. Other neighborhoods, no. Our consideration is, you've heard parking, but apparently in the ordinance there's made allowance for off-street parking. I know in our neighborhood, ambulances, snow removal, curb cleaning, even garbage pickup. It's just a very difficult thing, even with the homeowners that are there now, even those that have garages. So I speak for a number of people that say that the ADUs, certain neighborhoods, yes, consider the neighborhoods that it would be a detriment to. Above 13th East, you've got Foothill Boulevard that at multiple times in the city during the year, it's the worst air in the entire city. We don't want that area burdened with more pollution and more traffic.
Thank you. Dennis Eyre, followed by Claudia Johnson.
I'm from the East Bench, and I would say that the vast majority of the people on the East Bench are opposed to the ordinance as it is written. I am troubled, as other people are troubled, with the city's communication with the homeowners. And one of the things that has mentioned a number of times is the people who have gone to the website and saw it portrayed as a way to build, mother-in-law apartments. And we all know that that's not really what the real purpose of the ordinance is. So I would really urge the city to be a little bit more open with the public as to what we are really trying to accomplish, and that is to have more rental units throughout the city. And I think it's important to tell the people that have the single-family homes and so forth that are zoned that way, that really the passage of the ordinance will mean that those single-family homes will be downzoned into basically multifamily rental units. So I would just urge you to be more upfront with the public in doing that. Lastly, what I would like to comment on is, it's my understanding that you had a working session whereby you took a vote, and it was 4-3 to go citywide, as opposed to take into consideration certain things that maybe would point to the fact that it's not appropriate to have ADUs in certain areas of Salt Lake City. And I would say that we hope that if you choose to go ahead with this proposal, that when you vote on it, that you support those districts that are all in favor of having ADUs in their area, and that you respect the views and so forth of other people in the city, like the Avenues and like the East Bench, that are not in favor of ADUs at this point in time. Thank you.
Claudia Johnson, followed by Mike Mitchell.
My name is Claudia Johnson, and I live in the Sugar House area. I grew up there, and according to this memo, which I have written to you to look at, I think many of you have already, prior to me, have talked about, I think you need to look at what the purpose is that you're doing this. Are you trying to get money? Are you trying to get people to get business license? Because once they start renting, they have to have a business license. And who's getting the money from the business license? How often do you have to update that? it keeps going on, and I think that that's part of the problem. The other problem I think that you're not considering, which is one of my points there, is you are not staffed for that. And I think George Chapman brought that to your attention, is the fact you aren't staffed for that. And in my memo there, I did note the fact that I have a house across the street. Somebody has rented it out to 4 or 5 college students. The college students come. I have 4 or 5 cars on the street. I can't park on the street. My friends can't park on the street. My family can't park on the street because all these cars and the 2 duplex send their friends down the street because they don't want to park in front of their place. And so they're all piling up there. And when I called the city to report this, they said, oh, well, we don't check those things. And I said, well, what are you for? They said, well, we don't have personnel. So if you don't have personnel to monitor what you've already got in existence, I think you need to reevaluate what you're doing and why you're trying to do that. And I think that's been brought out on several of the previous speakers. I think it's a good idea. I built my house with an apartment because I had one in my house that I tore down. But I realized that mine was for a caregiver to live in and to supplement my income. I'm now a senior citizen. Don't feel like it, but I am a senior citizen living on Social Security. And that's the money that I don't have to try to figure out, can I pay this bill this month, and try to juggle that. This is kind of helping me out. But I think you need to really reevaluate why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and get input from maybe other people that you haven't gotten input on a committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Mike Mitchell. I live in a historic home in the Marmalade District, and I can tell you that the problem with this is a blanket ordinance throughout the city is a huge problem. Certain neighborhoods may function well with this type of situation, but certainly the avenues and Capitol Hill in the Marmalade District would be bad. The number one problem is density. I can count within 3 blocks of my home numerous apartment buildings that have gone up in Salt Lake City with minimal parking restrictions because of the fact we're presuming people are going to use transit. We've already heard earlier this evening how transit does not serve the residents of Salt Lake City for function on a day-to-day basis, and we're presuming yet that people who move in are not going to drive but use transit. That's false. This will probably most likely not help housing in Salt Lake City, as the majority of these will be short-term rentals and Airbnbs. I can tell you that because that's why the person bought the house next to me, and I can count 5 within a block of my house. There's no way for the city to enforce these, since the city will not enforce the illegality of short-term rentals already, as I have unfortunately found out. This will create definitely more traffic and worsening parking in all of our neighborhoods where it's already critical, especially for those of us who restore and live in an old house who can't modify a garage with an old driveway for a new car and thus have on-street parking. Do you want to create a city of single-family homeowners, or do you want to create a city of renters? Because this is most likely going to spark speculation in our real estate market, with speculators and developers purchasing property to be able to build multiple dwellings on one piece of property to be able to rent. There's no way that the city is going to be able to enforce owner occupancy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Patricia Sorensen, followed by Shirley Anderson.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you today. And I would like to say that nobody has brought up the one thing that is most on my mind, being against ADUs, and that is the additional crime problem. I have talked to 7 different police officers, and every single one of them have told me that in the East Bench, that this will create additional crime. Parking is a problem. Our schools will end up being overcrowded, because if you approve this, it's not going to stop at 25. We'll be lucky if it stops at 250. That's how things go. And I think that you go out on my street, I'm on a corner, and both ways at night, there's not a place to park a car. So you're adding all of this, you're adding all of these people to our school systems, which will cause overcrowding. You're causing additional crime problems in the neighborhood. And you're renting them to low-income people. I'd like to know, is it our tax dollars that are going to be paying their rent? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Good evening. My name is Shirley Anderson, and I live in the lower avenues. And you have heard much about the traffic problems there, so I'm not going to add to that. But I did want to say that I have a strong sense that we are working against cross purposes against something that was put into place 35 years ago, and it's called the Heritage District. We have all applauded that throughout the years, and we've had open houses for people to come and enjoy some of the historical offerings that we have in this city. Now, if we're going to allow extra dwellings on these properties, what about the heritage requirements? We have to maintain the original house exterior. Are we going to require that the additional home also follow exterior qualifications? That has not been addressed. Also, I do not think that there has been a check on the number of rentals in the avenues. Today I took my dog for a walk. On every major corner, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, almost every one of them had at least one or two authentic apartment buildings that already had many apartments and no parking. Quite a few of the original homes have 3 or 4 post office boxes at the front, so you know that those are multiple dwellings as well. Please reconsider that we've spent 35 years of effort to create a special district, and we are extending it into Marmalade and other areas, and now we seem to be going at cross purposes in supporting that. Thank you.
Tommy Wall, followed by, and I'm sorry, Tommy, I can't read it. And Darlene, I'm having a hard time. That's it. Tommy first, and then Darlene.
Thank you. I will definitely take a opposition stand. I'm looking at the big picture. We need to look at that from a non-monetary standpoint, but from a quality of life standpoint. We need to look at our community as to where it's going, where it's headed. And if we're going to make some changes that interrupt the progress of the city, we will not end up being able to come back to Salt Lake City in 20 years and say, wow, Salt Lake City has not changed for the worse. I'm talking about traffic problems, parking problems, quality of life, the air quality. We know how it is here in the wintertime. It's horrible. We need to think and look at the big picture. We want a community that is stable, that has purpose. And I want to commend the person who also brought up the fact that we have a generational problem. Somebody has a need, such as a person out here that spoke earlier, to take care of a family person, but that quickly changes with life experiences that come along, and suddenly the place is a rental house. Next thing, you've got, instead of this one person there, you've got 4 people. And then the worst case scenario is you have a meth house, and that causes crime.
Time.
I need to speak on that, and I thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Tommy. And Darlene, if you wouldn't mind when you come up stating your last name, please. And Henry, followed by Henry Chandra.
I'm Darlene Chitris, and I'm at 2105 Wasatch Drive, and I'm opposed to it. I have seen, we have renters across the street that have let the house fall apart. Last night, when I went down the street, there were 10 cars parked everywhere, in front of my home, in front of their place, everywhere. And I'm really opposed to it because I can see drugs, I can see all kinds of things and that happen in that. And it just goes right downhill when you get that. And many of them come and, you know, stay in the house. They're college kids and they just rent it out. So I feel that it's not a good thing for single dwellings to be built on a single property. I don't think that's good. There's all kinds of problems, drugs, and you get trashy people sometimes, and that's not a very good word to say, but that do not take care of, renters generally do not take care of properties. So I'm not in favor of this, single dwelling on a single property. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Henry Chandra. I'm a resident of Sugar House. I've been living there for about 17 years. I have been communicating with Mike Malloy, the city planner, for a couple of years now when I heard about the ADU proposal. And unfortunately, I'm only 0.2 of a mile short of this track, so therefore I did not qualify. So therefore, I'm really excited about this amendment for these reasons. One, when VHS tapes were introduced back in the 1980s, the film industry panicked that it will be the death of the theater attendance. But obviously, that's not so. In fact, the opposite occurred. I feel we fear much about nothing with ADUs when it comes to the destruction of the city that it might occur. Two, there has been concerns by the opponents of the ADU amendments regarding overcrowding. Besides the numerous evidence of other cities such as Portland that debunk that, within 1 square mile of the heart of Sugar House where I live, there are literally hundreds of apartment units built, creating untold amounts of problems. I feel it's out of control and only benefits developers. I would like the density to be spread out through the ADU amendments by giving the power back to the people to choose if they want to have ADU in their home instead of being concentrated in high-density buildings. Three, I have been waiting for the 2 years of this amendment to pass so I can tear down my house in Sugar House and rebuild a brand new home with the ADU incorporated. I admit that's to my own benefit. So I will be spending hundreds of thousands, hence create jobs for a few months, and the city will benefit with income taxes and also property taxes. Four, the 25 permits each year is too low when you consider that Portland issues more than 600 permits because there will be too many people who want this for our city. I propose double or even triple the permits, and that corporate developers are barred from gobbling up the permit within just one development. Five, the financial relief ADU will provide is tremendous to owners, and by increasing supply to the rental market, the law of supply and demand will ease rental increase. Six, for those who oppose ADU due to fear of loss of quality of life, I hear that Price, Utah is still quiet. Please give the power back to the people to control density instead of corporations. Let the people determine their own fiscal destiny, not the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Patrick Price, followed by James Ord.
My name is Pat Price. I live east of Foothill. And first, I'd like to thank you all for your service and for taking on tough issues. We appreciate that very much. I would like to speak against the ordinance as it's written for a number of reasons. I don't believe that ADUs really address affordable housing. And as we have heard, there are many areas in the city that probably don't fit for a worthy pursuit like ADUs. Obviously, the Avenues has problems. East Bench has problems as well. Traffic is a concern. Wasatch, for instance. is a highly trafficked road. Adding more cars to that road would be a disaster. Secondly, building in certain areas like the East Bench is very difficult. Many of the lots there are multi-leveled. Building an ADU on those units would be very expensive, thus defeating the purpose of trying to provide affordable housing simply because of the cost to build and therefore to rent. Third, I think that the citywide approach, because of the geographic and different areas of difference, is too aggressive an approach to begin with. I believe that the 25-unit limit that you have is a wise approach until we can get further information and understanding of the benefits and detriments that ADUs may provide. Finally, we talk much about diversity, and it's a topic of discussion. And our current zoning laws and the principles that they're built on are built to provide diversity. We've heard people speak to the fact that they think density is an issue and that they would like to choose where density is. The R1 zone provides that. People who live in the R1 zone live there because they don't want density. Therefore, I think that this really, as it's written now, is an assault on the R1 zone and really homogenizes things and thus, I think, dilutes diversity. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Ord. I live in Rose Park. I'm in favor of the ADU ordinance. In fact, I don't think it goes far enough. I think we need to go way further. And for all the things that have been said in favor of the ordinance so far, I can't agree more. But one of the things I'm hearing as a common theme tonight is fear. There's a lot of fear going on about what will happen to our neighborhoods if this ordinance is passed. The reality of it is that nothing different is going to happen. Unfortunately or fortunately, these ADUs are going in all over the damn city. You just can't avoid them. All you have to do is look on Craigslist and you'll find as many as you can find. And so as a result, we need to be regulating them so that they at least are conforming to zoning so that we are not having death trap apartments in people's basements without windows. So that's one of the first things. The next thing, and that's safety. The other thing too, though, is housing. We've got to provide more affordable housing throughout the city. I live on the west side. And I'm going to tell you that, and I'm an attorney, everybody, probably a lot of you know me, but I've been approached by multiple people on the west side, community organizations, who want to sue the city council for steering, for putting all the low-income people on the west side. And that's going to happen. It's not far off, I can promise you that. And so as a result, this ADU ordinance citywide would help to alleviate that because it would create affordable housing throughout the city, or at least the potential for it. I think that's really, really important. I think the other thing is that it's an excellent economic opportunity for a lot of people who would like to maybe have a rental unit on their property. I mean, we all can look back at, watching Happy Days and the fawns living upstairs above the garage. And I think a lot of people look at that, particularly surrounding the U or even in the downtown area as LDS Business College has increased its students. So I'm very much in favor of it, and all of my neighbors that I've spoken to are as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ord. I'm down to the last two comment cards. Is there anyone else that would like to? Great. We need to have you fill out some comment cards. If you'll keep your hands up, we'll have staff bring you cards. You can fill them out and give them back. Dave Iltis, followed by Kim Peterson.
Hi, my name's Dave Iltis. I live in the Avenues. I first moved to the Avenues in 1989. I've lived there off and on since then. I lived in an apartment there. I've lived in a converted house. I've lived in a shared house in the Avenues. And in 2000, I bought my home that had a basement apartment. That's what made it be possible for me to live in the Avenues, is to have the rental income from that basement apartment. It took 6 years of dealing with the zoning department to get that legalized, so it's now currently a legal basement apartment. I also own a second duplex on in the Avenues as well. We've heard a lot of people talk about how the Avenues don't need that, but that's actually one of the things that gives the Avenues character is the variety of everything from single-family homes to some smaller apartment buildings. This is something I both lived in and also have a basement rental, which currently isn't rented, but the duplex is. And if you want to look at, issues with the parking, go back to the transit master plan, go back to transportation, figure out a way to improve Salt Lake City's transit and improve biking, improve walking, improve walkable neighborhoods where you have more local businesses, and that will help to alleviate the parking. Salt Lake is still pretty backwards in a lot of that stuff, where we've lost a lot of neighborhood businesses, neighborhood markets, things of that sort. We need the density. If you want to have the valley not be so sprawled out, you need density and infill, and you need the ADUs. Owner-occupied, that is probably a good place to start, but you can't control that once the building is sold. But if somebody's building a new
Time.
ADU, that's probably good. And lastly, two things: the 25 limit is too low, and please overhaul the Good Landlord program. It doesn't work.
Hi, Kim Peterson, East Bench Community Council, here again. I just want to reiterate what I'd mentioned when I was here a couple of weeks ago, plus a thing or two. I still think the ADU concept is wrong for Salt Lake City because it's too overwhelming. It's too far-reaching. Changing every single-family home, single-family zoning to multifamily, I think is just the wrong approach. I mean, regardless of the pros or cons of ADUs in general, I just think that this idea of the far-reaching citywide approach, I think I think it's not going to work. I think it will have potential detrimental impact on property values. Another thing, I don't think this is an east side versus a west side thing either. I think it's a bad idea for East Bench, for the Avenues, for Rose Park. I mean, there are communities and neighborhoods all over the city that are just quiet, nice, picket fence kind of communities where people enjoy their backyards and their privacy and their quiet neighborhoods, and I think people would like to keep those neighborhoods intact. Another thing I'd like to suggest maybe is an alternative to this idea of ADU citywide would be to develop areas, for example, just south of downtown here. We've got entire blocks and we've got areas along main corridors, along, for example, State Street, Main Street, West Temple, wherever, that could be developed as multi-use areas with high-rise apartments with higher income, more luxury apartments, as well as as affordable, combined with business, make the areas walkable. You've got your mass transit that go through those areas. I don't know. I just think that's another approach to look at, rather than thinking this ADU approach is the fix-all for everything. Thank you so much.
Rand Perrier, followed by James Berenson.
As you heard, my name's Rand Perrier, or Perrier. I live at 1804 South, 2600 East, a couple of streets above Foothill. Across the street from me, there is a duplex, 5-bedroom on each side. We end up with at least 5 college students in that building on each side. And come snow removal time, parking time, it's miserable. Similar situations are, of course, going to come with an ADU. We have problems with, on our street, too many rentals, cars. I feel for the poor snow removal people trying to dodge all the cars as they try to plow the street. There is no ordinances about getting your cars off the street for the snow plows, like in New York. You can park on one side of the street one night, the other side of the street another night, but I see no enforcement, and I'm very much against the ADUs, and everybody on my street feels the same way that have single-family homes. I've been there 35 years. The house across the street, trouble is, it's been there 35 years. And back then, I'm not sure what enforcement was made by permit approval to build this side-by-side twin home, and then nothing's ever done about the parking situations. Thank you.
greed is one of the 7 deadly sins. Is that why the ADU is being pushed? I know in Mr. Luke's case it is. He's a greedy guy, but I'd like all of you to remember the great fires in Chicago and New York, because the buildings were packed so close that if a fire broke out in one house, it would spread to all the houses from the wind and the flames, the embers. Are you guys trying to create an inferno here, or just a catastrophe in the making? Parking, that's another good issue, because, you know, that stupid jackass Becker, when he was here, he says, you know, 15th East, you can't park on the west side of the street. People there pay taxes for their property, they pay taxes for their car, and yet they're deprived of being able to park on the west side of the street. I don't understand how you guys get away with this progressive, democratic, whatever you guys like to call it, thinking, but it's wrong. I think you're creating more of a safety hazard for the residents in these areas than what needs to be. I would say follow the money. That's what I'd honestly say, because you usually catch the crook at the end of the line. And for all the people out here, know who your district representative is. Districts in 1, 3, 5, and 7. Follow this vote and see how your councilmen vote on it. If you guys want to generate money, I can understand that, you know, because I run out of money, I go hungry. I can't, hey, you guys got to pay me more money. I'm going to triple your sewage tax so I can pay for my grandiose plans. But if you guys want to generate money, yet you do things like triple the sewage tax, and then you do the CO2 regulations on buildings, you say you act like you want to generate revenue, but you're putting in these rules and regulations that are pushing people out of the city. I mean, if you want to generate revenue, I think there could be a better way than creating potential fire zones everywhere, because everybody's packed so close together like sardines in a can.
Thank you, Mr. Berenson. Lori Carell, followed by Robert Lolini.
I am voting or talking against it. Several reasons why. One is that I really agree with the past people that have said you don't have the ability to enforce that people follow the rules. I have a neighbor down the street for 15 years. Her lawn is yellow, weeds. It's very visible. It's a fire hazard, and nobody has done anything about it. People will pretend that they live on property, but they won't. People are dishonest a lot of times, and they won't follow the rules. It'd be great if they do. I mean, I hope people will, but you know, everybody's out for a buck. I also think that real estate values will in the long term go down, not up. People do not like and will not pay high prices for being crammed together. There may be short-term benefits if the proposal now before the council is adopted, but in the long term, the overuse of utilities, lack of parking, increased noise, more garbage cans, overcrowding will most likely lower real estate values and stability and the desirability of the neighborhood. In the 80s, there was a recession and out-migration to California and other states. As a landlord, you couldn't rent anything, and the values and the market collapsed all housing in the Salt Lake Valley. We now have it in migration, inflation, and scarcity. The very thing that brings that influx of people to this valley is the low-density, high-quality, single-family neighborhoods and a high-educated and cohesive population. Changing the zoning code to increase density, lower desirability, all the issues of high-density living will invade R1 neighborhoods, and ultimately values will collapse. The comparison should be against R1 zone vigorously enforced codes. I don't want to have I bought my home because I liked the area. I understand the need for affordable housing. I really do. But I think there's got to be other ways instead of infringing on other people. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Lolini. To be clear, I guess I'm here to speak out against ADUs. I think there's probably little doubt in anybody's mind that the allowance of ADUs will impact the use, the density, and the character of our residential neighborhoods. And to allow them will change the character traits of our neighborhoods permanently and irreversibly. We have zoning laws that I believe, although I'm not a real estate expert, that control the use of our real estate in the valley. They designate what is to be used for multifamily housing, what is to be used for single-family housing. I think this blurs that line to a point that it will change it negatively and permanently. I think we need to recognize the fact that if we allow ADUs, if we try to limit it to 25 permits per year, the end result is the same. It permanently changes the character of our neighborhoods, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. Thanks for your service. Thanks for listening. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lolini. I'm down to the last two comment cards. Is there anyone that hasn't filled one out that would like to speak? All right, I am calling the last two. Matthew Weinstein, followed by, I don't know if this is Dahlia Thorham or Dallas Thomas, or what was that? Dallas Thomas, you're last, man.
My name is Matthew Weinstein. I live on the East Bench since 2003. I saw the coverage in the newspaper and just wanted to share my perspective just as one resident's view in support of the ADU ordinance and extending it to my part of the city. I think that it contributes to housing affordability and neighborhood livability, both in my community and citywide. I've heard concerns some people have raised that it would bring more affordable housing to the East Bench with all the fears that that raises. Personally, I don't want to feel like I'm trying to live in an island of wealth walled off from the rest of the world, especially when that means that other areas therefore have to take more than their fair share of affordable housing. So I think this is a small but significant part of a successful housing strategy for the city. On the parking issue and the requirement of off-street parking, I would just say certainly in my area, around 14th East and Harrison, there's plenty of room for parking, plenty of on-street parking. It would be a shame if that requirement were to defeat the purpose of the ordinance and discourage the development of an appropriate number of ADUs, at least in my area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for the record, it's Dallas Thomas, right?
Yeah, Dallas Thomas. Thank you. My name is Dallas Thomas. I own a home in the 9th and 9th District. I'd like to say that I support this. And I'm sorry, my thoughts are kind of muddled. I didn't come here for this. I was here for Indigenous Day. But I have a lot to say about this. And not to get too personal, but really quickly, I'd like to say, my mother's in the process of losing her house. She has nowhere to go. She has no retirement. I don't know what she's going to do. I mean, honestly, the only thing I can think to do is convert my garage into a home for her. So I completely support this. As far as some of the issues here, parking, I mean, I feel like that's a mass transit issue. I mean, back to the sorry, I don't like talking in front of people. But back to the mass transit, the transit blah, 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 whatever. I mean, we need to expand it. It helps people get in and out of Salt Lake City. It does not help you get around Salt Lake City. I use mass transit by choice. We're a one-car household. I'd also like to talk about the required parking space. I mean, I have plenty of room in my street. All my neighbors, they all park on the street. I have a garage. I mean, luckily, but I mean, we have one car out on the street if I take up the garage, but my neighbors have 3 or 4 cars, it's fine. I don't know why I would be required to create a parking spot for this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And also on that note, if you're gonna require a parking spot, the height should be taller. I mean, I should be able to build a second layer on a second level on top of my garage, and then I can continue using my garage. I mean, there has to be a better solution from what I've seen. But I completely support it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council members, I don't have any other comment cards, so I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, Oh,
Ye-
good.
Yes,
Um,
Councilmember Adams.
Point of personal privilege, if I may. I think it's important to, while we're having this discussion, talk a little bit about short-term rentals, Airbnbs, that type of thing, and explain that I did not know this until I had this job, but the state has chosen to regulate that, and the ordinance from the state, the law from the state says that it has to be at least 30 days for short-term rental. I'm sure you are all aware that there are many that are not 30 days, right? And we can't really do anything about that because it's a state law, and it can only be enforced if there is a complaint that is lodged, and the complaint has to be about noise or a problem. It can't just be that it exists. You can't find out about it by going on the website and seeing that it's available. So it's a pretty high bar to do something about it. Our hands are tied because the legislature took it out of our scope of involvement when they did that. So we're dealing with that as another layer of this issue. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. And I need to apologize to Councilmember Penfold. I was supposed to defer some time to him.
It's
right
okay.
after the comment.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion to close the hearing, but before I do, I just wanted to briefly review our process as a council. One of our priorities this year as a council has been housing, and part of our discussion has been about whether there is some value in ADUs being used as tools to expand housing options in the city, and whether they should be allowed in more or all areas of the city. We've heard from a lot of people with a lot of opinions on this issue. There are people who want ADUs citywide with no cap. There are people who don't want any ADUs anywhere in the city. Those who like the ordinance that's on the books now, those who want it overhauled. What I think we are challenged with as a body and as a community is to evaluate some significant competing values. We want you to all know that we have heard your concerns. We've had several briefings on this issue. This is our second public hearing. And some of the values and conflicts we are experiencing are things like perhaps a desire or need to create new housing units, certainly a concern and respect for the character and scale of single-family residential development, a means for seniors to stay and age in place in their neighborhoods, concerns about increased traffic, parking in neighborhoods where street parking is already scarce, improving neighborhood walkability, adding affordability in our housing stock, whether or not ADU should be used as, or might be used as short-term rentals, preserving the feel and quality of historic neighborhoods, and enforcement. I think parking and enforcement are the two we've probably heard the most about. We have a growing affordable housing crisis in this community and many communities in this valley and across the country, actually, and so we're all faced with sort of struggling with these competing values. You've shared with us. There's still opportunity to share more with us. We'll be closing this public hearing this evening, but we will continue this discussion at our briefing session on October 17th, where we will address even to a greater extent many of the concerns that you've shared with us. So I just want to commend you for being here and for taking the time out of your really busy schedules to share with us your concerns and your opinions. They really do mean a lot to us, and they help inform us as we balance these challenging and very frequently conflicting values in our community. Mr. Chair, I move that we close this public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and second by Councilmember Luke. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. We're on to item B8, an ordinance for Homeless Resource Center zoning text amendment. I don't have any cards, so, oh, I do have a few cards. Thank you. Okay, same thing. I'll call two names. The first, please come up, and the second one will be at the ready. Bridget Allison Eberly, followed by George Chapman.
It's been a very long night for everyone, so I'll just make it very brief. Homelessness is something that I feel very passionate about. I am a registered nurse. Prior to working as a nurse, I did work in the inner city emergency room at LDS Hospital for many years. I have always worked night shift here in your city, so I am very, very aware of your very significant homeless population. I'm also a very heavy library user and transit user. Just when you start to implement this program, in the past, everyone has meant to do right by our homeless population, but in the past, they have always made the scales too large. As we all know, with homelessness, the lack of shelter is the least of many of these individuals' problems. We have everything from mental health issues to domestic violence to substance abuse. So when we're looking at establishing these new resource centers, if we could just go slow so that we don't take in 200 people overnight, so that we can tweak out what may or may not have worked right. And again, I have asked this in the past with the library. I was one of the people in favor of the library being open 24 hours a day. If somewhere in the budget they could find a resource center to be over at the public library as well. This is where a lot of our homeless population is in the daytime, and these people, these individuals, they exist. Everybody wants to say they do not want these people in their backyard. These are our neighbors, and everyone deserves a second chance, and these people need our help. Thank you.
George Chapman. Did George leave? Oh. He's coming up. After George, we'll Ryan Parker.
Okay, George Chapman, this is one of those issues where you're putting in a design or a project or some kind of zoning text amendment, but you don't have funding to actually enforce it. So what happens if, as you have the problem with the Midvale shelter, drugs all over the place? They have drugs all over the place. What happens with a wonderful idea that you need single women's shelter on 7th South, but what happens if there are a whole bunch of drugs and it consistently is a drug problem and you consistently have drug dealers out there? What do you do? I think there's not enough enforcement again, not enough maintenance of a good, clean, well-maintained city. And I'm not talking about grass, I'm talking about the social issues that surround are in the neighborhood of these homeless resource centers. This is a zoning text amendment that essentially says you can put a homeless resource center or something like it in an area. And I'm kind of concerned because that means you might have a few more, and if Odyssey House and First Step are expanding to 100 beds, they could end up calling themselves a homeless resource center, and all of a sudden you multiply your homeless resource centers. I'm concerned that you haven't thought this through enough, and I'd like to see those issues explored before you pass it. I'd also like to see in everything that says homeless resource center, or you have a high transient population like that, you have a walking police patrol. That should be part of the services, and along with obviously social workers, but a 24-hour security walking patrol would be needed for the community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'd like to first make a motion that all resource centers go before ADUs. Anyway, I'm going to try not to be as melodramatic. However, it feels like I'm coming down to the 11th hour when it comes to the future of our resource centers. And we have to look back to my argument that I just want to provide is capacity, 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 capacity. Since December 13th, everyone knows there is not enough. There is not enough beds. And there's not going to be enough beds. We can all have great discussions at coffee shops about homelessness and social issues, national epidemics and whatnot. We have to look at what Salt Lake City can do for the future of people receiving these services. I would ask you, Councilman Kitchen, do you think 200 beds is enough for women experiencing homelessness in your city? I would ask anyone of that of High Avenue, where they talk about 80-20 split. Last night, over 500 men slept in our downtown shelter. We cannot, all right, I plead, I can't educate this enough. I'm not trying to lecture people. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm saying that we all see this. I can't be the only one who does. We need more. We cannot pass amendments that are going to limit any resource center to simply 200. A capital city in any state in America, 400 is not acceptable. We will never find a way to control a population until we find a way to control national epidemics, and that's far beyond me. What I have is what's in front of me and what I'm seeing, and I fear that this winter, with safe zones and everything in place, that last year we had 81 people die on the streets. And we had a facility that had thousands of beds and didn't turn anyone away.
Time.
And I leave with this. If this amendment goes through, then plan 2 contingencies. 1, build more shelters, or let the Shelter the Homeless operation maintain our downtown shelter.
Robert, I'm down to my final 2 cards. So if anyone would like to fill out a card, would like to speak on this. Robert Goodman, followed by Dave Iltis.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm a homeowner in District 5. I would just like to take this time and echo the words of the executive director at the Road Home, Matt Mikovich. I believe last time he spoke, and I'm a volunteer at the Road Home, but I cannot speak for this organization. He said that if you break down the current populations at the shelters, you have senior citizens, veterans, those suffering from drug addiction, and those making a low income, and therefore those are manageable populations. I would also like to thank you all for addressing the housing crisis. I would assert that action needs to be taken now. Thank you so much.
My name's Dave Iltis. In looking at the location of the 2 homeless shelters that are going to be in Salt Lake, the 7th South one, and then the Hope Avenue shelter, the low-income people and homeless people tend to rely on non-automobile transportation. And in particular, there's a lot of use for bicycles and walking. Access to those 2 shelters there is abysmal for bicycling. We had an opportunity on 7th South to add bike lanes. You could actually go in tomorrow and put them in without doing anything, any modification at all, and it was just the complete, utter lack of political will of the last mayor to put them in on that road. And then 300 South, we have an opportunity to put bike lanes on there certainly from roughly about 6 South all the way to 21st South without too much effort there. And I think the road's slated for repair sometime in the near future. But you need to look at how do you reach those shelters? How are people going to reach those? And right now, that's not good. There's huge problems with the one on 33rd South, but that's beyond the scope of Salt Lake City. You could also look at putting a bike path on the tracks line from 13th South to 21st South. I believe there's room there to do something like that, which would help improve access to those shelters. In terms of the discussion generally on homelessness, there's still almost no leadership on how to prevent homelessness with healthcare, affordable housing, affordable transit, and raising the minimum wage. No one talks about a living wage and raising the minimum wage in Salt Lake anymore. Not you, not the mayor. It's not in the papers, and please look at the causes of this, and if you want to, I know this is about the location and the ordinance on the shelters themselves, but look at preventing homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, council members. That is my last comment card. So I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close this public hearing, and I'd like to take a minute to just mention that if the city were allowed to have a conversation or ordinance around living wage, I'm sure Councilmember Mendenhall would be at the front of that. She said so earlier today in our briefing. So.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and a second by Councilmember Luke. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. All right, we're moving right along. We are on to item B9, and B9 through B15 will be heard as one public hearing. So if you're going to speak in regards to anything between B9 and B15, please fill out a card and you'll be called up. I have 2 cards, so if you want to speak, hold up your hand and we'll bring you a card. George Chapman, followed by James Berenson.
George Chapman, the reason I'm speaking is because you have something in the grant application called Main Street. My problem with the Main Street grant application is there's some conditions, I believe, for that application that might tie your hands on the RDA for State Street. The Main Street effort sounds good, but I don't think it really applies to State Street. I like the idea of State Street being 6 lanes. I'd like to get rid of the medium and put in a wide bike lane on both sides, but that's something the City Council should decide with UDOT, and I'm worried that the Main Street grant may tie your hands. There's also a parallel effort on Life in State, Envision Utah's vision for State Street that also lowers speed limits to 20 miles an hour, puts in lots of Charlie Luke roundabouts, and makes it a neighborhood, old-time, walkable, bikeable, horse-riding street. So I'm concerned, heads up, I think the grant application for Main Street should be really looked at hard. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, George.
I'm not sure what number it is, but it's one of those ones you say. It's about getting a new police dog for drugs. I think that would be a good idea. Drug use is out of control, and it's been ruled illegal in most states except Colorado, Washington, and these other progressive strongholds, but for the most part, they've been ruled illegal, and this war on drugs is just wasting taxpayers' dollars. You guys want to generate revenue? Legalize drugs and then apply the taxation that you guys are so fond of instilling on things. That would generate revenue all over. War on drugs, people still do them. I called my mother Saturday. She say somebody next door, there's like a 62-year-old sex offender that lives there. He has some teenager living there smoking marijuana right on the front porch and is blowing in her house. I'm like, call the cops. This is illegal. They should not do that. And I just don't understand this, but I would be in favor of you guys hiring more police to enforce these drug laws, or to legalize drugs, and then you could taxation them, because the war on drugs is another failure. I don't think drugs have stopped coming up from Mexico since who knows when. You guys catch a little bit here, a little bit there, but the most of it comes through Bill Clinton's NAFTA plan enabled the great push of those drugs to come across the border. And it's like, I just don't understand these things. If make them legal, then tax the shit out of them. But please hire more police dogs to help prevent drug abuse. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my last comment card, council members, so I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing for grant application items B9 through B15 and defer action to a future meeting, with the exception of items B11, 12, and B13, which may be considered as part of tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and a second by Councilmember Johnston. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. We're on to item C, potential items, action items this evening. On to C1, ordinance for Lincoln Elementary School South Alley vacation.
Mr. Chair, I move the council adopt an ordinance vacating a city-owned alley adjacent to properties located between approximately 200 East Street and 269 East, south of the former Lincoln Elementary School.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Penfold and second by Councilmember Mendenhall. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I hope this is the last alley that we vacate.
We've heard that before, right? Any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. On to item C2, a resolution of foreign trade zone.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council adopt a resolution pertaining to the transition of the existing foreign trade zone number 30 from the traditional site framework to an alternative site framework.
So a motion and a second by Councilmember Adams and Luke. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Moving right along to item D, comments. First, questions to the mayor from the city council. The mayor isn't here this evening. We have the chief of staff, Patrick Leary. Is there any questions for the chief of staff? Yes, Councilmember Kitchen.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for being here tonight. Where is the mayor tonight? Is she around?
She's representing the city at the Utah State Department of Public Safety's annual banquet, I think.
Oh, great. I would request that you have a conversation with Director of Community and Neighborhoods, Mike Reberg, about ways that we might go about holding off on future petitions for alley vacations until we can have a policy conversation. Councilmember Mendenhall, every time we have a petition to close an alleyway, she requests that we have a more formal conversation, and I would like, acknowledging that we don't have a lot of bandwidth to address this from a policy perspective, probably not for the rest of the year and probably into the first part of 2018. I would like to work with the administration to maybe stem the tide a little bit of these petitions. So that's my request to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilmember Mendenhall.
I have a comment and a request, and my comment is about the HRC Human Resource Center, Homeless Resource Center site meetings that happened last week. And I appreciate that they were held on site. I had a good time talking to people out there, and my request is that we convene a dialogue quickly, at least with Councilmember Kitchen and myself to begin with regard to the feedback we're receiving from residents and business owners immediately adjacent, and begin this dialogue about mitigation in advance, opportunities for business support in advance, and planning for that. And we've done this with people like Bill Knowles and other city projects in the past. So it's not a new wheel we need to invent, but I do think it's something we need to get behind quickly. So I'd love to set up a meeting with whomever in the administration can meet with us soon to start that brainstorming dialogue.
Sure, we'd be glad to. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lear, for being here to take those questions. On to the comments to the City Council. I have a few comment cards here. If you would like to address the council, please fill out a comment card, and hand it to staff. We have staff around here still, so. Rules of decorum still apply. I'm going to call two names. First individual, please come to the microphone, and the second one be ready. Bridget Allison Eberly, followed by Carlos Jimenez. Okay, Carlos Jimenez, followed by Claudia Johnson.
Boy, you guys have a tough job. I just came here this evening to thank you guys for passing the Indigenous recognition thing. My ancestors came into this area in 1540, I'm a direct descendant of those Spaniards. Because of my name, people think we came from somewhere else. The tribe I belong to, historically, you have called my people Anasazis. Those are the people who are dug up downtown. That's a bad word. We never used it. But I thank you for what you're doing. That's important to me. It's very emotional. One of the things I think we need to do as a society is recognize the wrong that we've done to people. It's important. It's important. But to teach it in our public schools about the major tribes that exist today, why they ended up, how they ended up where they are today, the major hundreds of battles that took place against the settlers and these tribes. They did not go willingly to the places where they exist today. I also wanted to thank the mayor. I wish he was here. Last September, I came into the mayor's office and asked that she fly the MIA POW flag, the Missing in Action Prisoner of War flag, which is very dear to my family. She did not only say yes, she had a ceremony out front recognizing my uncle, Tomas Montoya, from the Korean War, and my youngest daughter's grandmother's brother, who was shot down in World War II. Just 2 weeks before Japan surrendered, a week after Japan surrendered, they beheaded him and about 35 other airmen. I served this country 21 years. I was on the DMZ doing joint operations with South Korean Special Forces and U.S. Army Special Forces. I also fought during the drug wars.
Time.
I encourage you to see a movie called American Made. I was there. I was not part of the corruption that took place with those people. People are naive about the problem and who started the epidemic. See it. But please thank the mayor on behalf of many people in my family. It's very important to me. It's very important to my family and all the other members of the MIA POW families in the city.
Thank you very much,
you
Mr.
all.
Jimenez.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Point of personal privilege. Can we thank you for your service to our country? Thank you so much. We really appreciate. I am. Thank you for your service to our country. We appreciate it.
Men, my friends that were, I'm going to be leaving to the South in a few weeks, to Alabama and Georgia. I've been given permission to disclose some classified information to families of my friends who are still listed MIA, who were killed there. I look back, it was all for nothing. We Americans love drugs, but also there's a lot of other people involved with drugs that are bringing it here. See this movie, I guarantee it's true. But thank you for recognizing myself, but you don't need to thank me. Thank you, though. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Claudia Johnson, followed by George Chapman.
I'd like to bring out a point. Community Council, East Liberty Park Community Council agreed to put signal lights on 13 South and 9 South on 600 East. And it reminds me when I worked at Evans and Sutherland Computer Corporation, the big engineering thing, a child goes up to a parent and says, I want a swing. And by the time the child gets the swing, it's this elaborate thing. And all they wanted was a rope and a tire in a tree. And we got the signal light, but now we have to turn right and go all the way around the block and waste all that gas money and all that gas and the emissions to go around the block to go left, because we can't go left. And yet the signal light is there and there's no traffic, but you can only go right. I don't understand why we cannot turn on that light. So I'm just picking a bone here. I don't know why it's set up to do that. We did it initially, and again, we go back to the tire and the rope versus what came out with this elaborate deal, which is what we've got right now. Let's waste the gas. Let's waste our time driving around the park so you can go back home. Anyway, thank you.
George Chapman. I have to agree with Claudia. When they proposed the bicycle boulevard, they did not tell the community councils, I went to every meeting, they did not tell us that there would only be a right-hand turn lane. It was to protect bicyclists, but they didn't tell us that. They brought us the plan that said there's a toucan light, you press the button, the bicycles safely can get across. They did not do that, and Claudia's right, air pollution is increased because of that. That was wrong. The reason I'm here tonight is I heard last week an energetic presentation by Stan Penfold at the UTA board meeting that said the city council, I believe, said the city council wanted a $65 million flying bridge airport tracks. And I'm confused. Did I miss the vote on that? Did you actually vote to support the airport tracks? Because it came across as if the city council wanted the airport tracks. And that's what I have a concern about. Did you have another secret meeting, Stan?
No, I'd be happy to share my comments with you. I did not suggest the council approve that at all. I asked for the opportunity to address it.
Okay. I'm here to ask you that before you go any further with any plans or suggestions on airport tracks, you have a very vigorous discussion, public discussion, and public hearing on it. Because I think a better way to spend $50 million is what the airport board is talking about, sending tracks to North Temple to 5600 West, with the understanding that in Seattle, Amazon helps pay for the rail line. They do. So they're good stewards of our air. The airport board is talking about every other train going to the airport. And right now, 1,100 passengers a day go to the airport. But one of the few remaining destinations is International Center, and it does not have any real mass transit. Buses are a joke. So consider that before you do a flying bridge.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mr.
for listening.
Chapman. James Berenson, followed by Dave Iltis.
Since this is general, I direct this toward you, City Attorney. I tried to engage you in a conversation today after I had a meeting with one of the council members. You were too busy to talk to me. You won't answer my question in this forum. So when is it would be a good time that you could answer my question on how to get the city books audited? $237 million is a lot of money, and I just don't see it being spread equally around the city. The roads are crap. There's very little police presence in some areas. I would like to know where this money is being spent on and what on. You refuse to engage me in conversation. You have one of your minions pull you away like you're busy. I know it's funny, isn't it? I look downtrodden and out of touch. I couldn't possibly have the capacity to think freely, could I? When can we have this discussion? I would like to say thank you to Mr. James Rogers today. Charlie Luke is my elected representative. How in the hell that happens, I have no idea, but if Russia can hack the election, I guess Goldman Sachs can hack the election too. Why do you still work here, Mr. Luke? Why don't you go work for Goldman Sachs? They'd pay you a hefty bonus because we all know Goldman Sachs is heavily invested in solar panels and wind farms. You pushed that legislation right through. But Mr. Rogers, I'd like to say thank you. You're not my elected representative, but you took time out of your busy day to help me and push me down a road that hopefully I can come out of and I can finally rid myself of this state. Thank you, sir. It took a lot of honor and integrity, and I do appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Berenson. I'm down to our last comment card.
I'm still waiting. It was like the last meeting in July. I was told I would be given the name of the federal case in where it is dictated that you can limit freedom of speech. This isn't the first time I've brought this up. I was supposed to get an answer August 8th, but I didn't get an answer. So when will I get an answer to this question? What is the name of the case that allows you guys to do this?
Well, we'll make sure staff gets that, and we'll have it ready for you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. I'm down to the last comment card. Brooke Carrington. I'm after Dave. Sorry, Dave, I forgot about you.
No worries.
But it's because I'm eager to get to Brooke, because she's the last card.
Okay. Hi, my name's Dave Eltis. I'm here again. Thank you so much for listening. I know this is hard, and sometimes the comment period lasts quite a long time, like tonight. I had just a couple of very short, disparate comments on different issues. First, in regards to the ADUs, we do need more high-rises in Salt Lake. And if you want to increase density, you can't continue to build 2-story and 3-story buildings. You have to look at 30-story buildings downtown, because otherwise all we're going to end up with is sprawl throughout the valley, which means more transportation, more air pollution. Second, on LED lightings, I've set up a meeting with public utilities, I think on the 17th, but LED lights are going in throughout the city. Public Utilities has no policy for how this is happening. No apparent policy whatsoever. The lights are too bright that are going in. They're the wrong color. They're not good for the health of the city. Yes, they're good for reducing carbon emissions, but there's no forethought in this whatsoever, and it's very distressing. We've got one in our neighborhood that is just far, far too bright. Alley vacations. I'm glad to hear that you guys are going to put the brakes on those. If you look at the McClellan Trail, there are several alleys that run perpendicular to the McClellan Trail that absolutely should be converted into additional bike path that would go and to access the McClellan Trail. And these are throughout the city. There are many, many places where these could be bumped into sort of mid-city, mid-block crossings, or, you know, back routes that would be much safer for bicycling. On another topic, the airport tracks should be extended to the International Center, and if you're considering two options, a ground floor and an upper floor, please figure out how to get that to the International Center. And spur lines are a royal pain, so if you can make it be a direct line, that would be good. Thank you.
I know I'm the last one. So sorry. My apologies for being late on the ADU. I'm glad that Dave came before me. This is a kind of a carbon copy of what I've sent to Councilman Luke. I am fairly new to this discussion, so please understand that I realize that you've maybe processed some of these thoughts. I live in the Foothill area. I am an adamant supporter of the University of Utah. I think it's good for our community. Foothill is a mess. Increasing the density along there is a bad idea. If we're going to increase our density and look for affordable housing possibilities in our city, I have driven around the area just directly south of downtown, bordered by State Street and West Temple, 5th South to 13th South. And there are so many areas there where I feel like there's a lost opportunity. I agree with what Dave said about, you know, building structures up and increasing our density that way is the way to go. I'm not a fan of the ADU. I've lived in neighborhoods where we've had a lot of mother-in-law apartments, and increasing the density that way seems like kind of a haphazard way to dot the area with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We would be affecting 25 families per year. If we built one structure that would accommodate 200 families, that makes a whole lot of a more meaningful impact than dotting the neighborhoods with ADUs. And I would encourage our growth to be centered in the downtown area where services are already in place, transit's already in place, decreasing the time congestion on the roadways. You know, I've been in Utah County today. Coming back in the middle of the day was just one clog after another. And so if we want to have Salt Lake be a viable city, that's a better way to go than just kind of littering the neighborhoods with an apartment here or there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I do not have any more comment cards. Is there anyone that would like to address the City Council this evening? Great. We are going to move on to item E1, which is new business. It's a resolution for capital improvement program, which is the CIP, and debt management guiding policies resolution.
Mr. Chair, I move the council approve a resolution adopting the capital improvement program allocations for fiscal year 2017-18.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Mendenhall and second by Councilmember Luke. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that motion passes. We're on to item F, unfinished business. So F1 is a resolution for general fund capital improvement projects. We are looking for a
I'm sorry,
motion.
is that what I just?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been long. I needed to, no, we are on F1. I'm sorry. This is unfinished business. Now we just need to adopt the CIP program.
So just to clarify, and we might need to back up here, the previous resolution was a modification of our policy and guidelines from 1999, and I think that was your intent to approve that, Councilmember Mendenhall. And I'm looking to the attorney to see if, basically it was a motion to adopt the resolution.
Yes.
So, do we need to revisit that?
Ben will tell us.
Come on, Mr. Ludke, tell us what we did wrong.
2 motions for CIP. The motions were swapped, so you'd want to go back and redo the first one.
Yes.
Great. We're going to go back to item E1, which is a resolution for capital improvement program and debt management guiding policies.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the council adopt the proposed resolution of capital and debt management guiding policies.
Second.
Just a bunch of seconds.
Third,
So,
fourth.
Councilmember Adams has made a motion, and because Councilmember Johnson's right next to me, he seconded it. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries, yes, that motion is adopted. We're on to item F1, which is the resolution for general fund capital improvement projects now.
I move that the council adopt a resolution for the capital improvement program allocations for fiscal year 2017-18.
Is there a second?
Second.
So their motion's been made by Councilmember Mendenhall and a second by Councilmember Adams. Is there any discussion? I thought that this CIP list this year was well done. I thought that the way the impact fees were implemented, the whole program, I thought was just was the best smooth sailing that we've had in 4 years doing this, at least for us.
And dog parks, hello.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor's administration, for taking, some shortfall and figuring out a proposal. And I'm so glad that dog parks were a part of that. We're finally making some changes there after years. And a bridge at Backman.
So, bridge to Backman, here we go.
Fairmont
We've
Park.
had the motion, we're going to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that carries. Way to go.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Penfold and second by Councilmember Kitchen to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Consent agenda passes, and we're done. Thanks.